Howdy everybody, this is Omar, your Audio Amigo, here with another Audio Amigo review for you guys. Today we're going to be looking at a gaming IEM from Moondrop of all people. These are the Moondrop Rays. I believe they're the first IEMs in Moondrop's sort of gravity product line of gaming IEMs, priced at $100 US, with the same driver configuration as the very popular Moondrop May, but featuring a new website for controlling the DSP chip and a couple of other things. Are the Rays worth the extra cash compared to its older sister? Well, let's see. Quick disclaimer, these Rays were sent to me by Apos Audio for review. I'm not being paid for this review, and I do have to send these back at the end of my review process, but I've gone ahead and activated the paid promotion feature here on YouTube anyway. I do these disclaimers because I believe in full transparency when there's potential bias besides my own personal taste at play. Thank you so much to Apos Audio for loaning me these, and thank you all for watching and continuing to support the channel. So the family resemblance with the May starts as soon as you just look at the boxes. Same box design, same internal packaging, but slightly different accessories from the May to the Rays. Inside you will find the IEMs themselves. You will get Moondrop's standard brown leather zip case. You get a set of standard bore black silicone tips, nothing really super special there. And you get a USB extension to hook this up to your computer if your computer is sort of further away from where your desk chair is. The brown case here is nice. It's the same one that comes with the May and the Aria II. It provides pretty decent crush resistance there. The inside is padded and soft to protect the IEMs from scratches, and has this little mesh pocket that's big enough for like ear tips or a USB adapter or something else rather small. The zipper works well, and overall I like the case. I do prefer the sort of blue magnetic one that comes with the, I believe, the Starfield 2 and the Stellaris, but this is a nice little case. I do wish that Moondrop included spring tips or something a bit more premium rather than these regular black ones. Something, sort of to differentiate this from the May, which comes with the exact same package minus this cable here. Then again, this is the same accessories package that comes on the Aria II, and there are other IEMs at this price range that come with less overall in terms of accessories. So I'll go ahead and say that the accessories package on the Rays is adequate. All right, let's take a closer look at these cables, starting with the USB extension one. As you can see, it's not the greatest. It feels very rubbery in the hands. It's very memory prone just from being in the box for shipping. It's nothing really special. It's your standard USB Type A male to USB C female. All this is really for is, as I said, extend the reach of the cable so that you can hook these IEMs up to your computer. Not a huge fan of this inclusion here. Yeah, I see why they did it, but the quality is just not great. You can see the memory that it's got going on here. It's a bit of a pain to manage. Yeah, I'd probably replace this or just move my computer closer to the nicer cable. Speaking of the nicer cable, this is essentially a green and purple version of the DSP cable that you get on the Moondrop May. It's a green 4-wire weave that splits into 2-wire twists at the Y-split. The USB-C connector features a drawn connector rather than the stamp style, which y'all know I prefer. It has Rays branding on one side and the Moondrop Gravity branding on the other. The Y-split is matching purple, which is nice to see. I like it when all the hardware matches. And unlike the May, which has a chin slider that's only sort of on the bottom half of the cable here, this one has no chin slider, so that's an interesting difference there. You have the same sort of cluster of inline controls with a microphone on the back. Moondrop claim that the microphone is using some sort of AI noise reduction technology built in for clearer communications. So here are two samples, one in my typical quiet room, sort of recording setup, and another in the same room but with a fan running in the background.
Stabilizers have many shapes. The trend in gas models is to make the stabilizer elliptical, or at least well-rounded, with an aspect ratio of approximately 3:1. On rubber designs, the stabilizer tends to be a rectangular shape like a wing and may have an aspect ratio as high as 6:1. Rudders, including both fin and rudder surface, also vary in shape, but have an aspect ratio of approximately 1.5:1. The horizontal tail, or stabilizer, controls the upsetting, diving, and zooming forces. The rudder, or vertical tail, holds the airplane on a steady heading, controlling left or right turning forces. The one remaining requirement for inherent stability is lateral control of the airplane. For example, if a wing dips, some quality of the ship's design must function automatically to bring the wing back into position.
So those are the mic tests. The 2-pin connectors here feature the sort of preformed ear hooks. They're quite nice. The connectors are a bit stubby and have the same purple color with very clear right and left stereo indicators on them. You all know it's coming, so I'm just going to say it again. I am not a fan of IEMs that use recessed sort of style connectors on non-recessed sockets. I think it just makes the IEM look less clean and a bit, unrefined. Just make recessed sockets on the IEMs or use non-recessed cables, guys. I don't think it's that hard. It looks clunky. Yeah, it's a nitpick, but it's something that bothers me. Overall, I think this cable is fine. It doesn't feel particularly rubbery or bad in the hands. It's not what I would call silky or smooth in the hands. I do prefer the way the cable on the May feels. It just feels a tiny bit more premium. This one feels a bit more plasticky. But, there's no microphonics, no real memory here. No matter how you sort of just lay it down, it sits pretty well. I think it's a good cable overall for the Rays. As with the cable, owners of the Moondrop May will recognize the construction of the IEMs pretty easily here. It's the exact same 3D printed resin lower shells with metal faceplates that are on the May. Exact same construction here. This resin is a bit more transparent than the one on the May, and the appearance of the shells overall is much more showy, I will say. The nozzles, as you can see, are part of the lower shells and feature a recessed metal filter to protect the drivers from debris. Speaking of drivers, since this is a bit more of a see-through shell than on the May, you can see the double stack of the drivers sitting there in the shells. There is a vent hole here on the front for the front volume, and there's another vent, where is it? There, on the sort of front tip of the IEM for the back volume. Thanks to all of that venting, I experienced no driver flex or pressure buildup issues on the Rays. There is a bit of a comfort wing going on here on the back of the IEM with a bit of a recess here, and there's the tiniest little bit of a bulge here to help it sit in your ear better. But these are quite small shells overall, and I think that's just helped them sit in your ears a bit more comfortably. Construction here is identical to the May, so the reliability / durability should be the same. I have seen several Mays with the faceplates popped off, so maybe keep an eye out on that for the Rays, but outside of that, I expect them to be fairly durable. When it comes to overall specifications, the Rays here take after their older sister pretty much identically. You get the exact same 10mm sapphire-coated dynamic driver paired with the exact same 6mm annular planar in the coaxial configuration, so they're stacked one on top of the other. Impedance and sensitivity on both of them are identical, meaning that the Ray are super easy to drive should you choose to use them with a standard 3.5mm analog cable. Curiously, the nozzles on the Rays are larger by 1/4 millimeter, 6 1/4 versus 6.5 millimeters on the May. The shells on the Rays are also a gram heavier, which is interesting, but the cable on the May is weightier than the one on the Rays, making it the heavier package overall. Neither of these really changes much in terms of sound when exposed to higher impedance sources or impedance adapters. The planar is only active about 8 kilohertz. There's a tiny bit of attenuation past that point, but it's really not noticeable unless you're A-Bing, and even then it's barely there. Outside of the nozzles, the Rays really aren't too different from their older sister, meaning they're a pretty typical DD plus annular planar hybrid IEM. But now we come to the cool wall, and let's go ahead and get this out of the way right at the start. I feel like these are a bit of a Marmite IEM. You're either going to absolutely love the looks of the Rays here, or you're going to absolutely hate them. Personally, I've been pretty excited about these just purely based on the look since I saw them on Moondrop social media. I think it looks like the Green Goblin got a hold of the May and worked on them in his lab. They look great. I think they pair fantastically with the Hiby R4 Evangelion. And my only real complaint about the design, if I show you guys here, is, so this is the left one, and this is the right one. So you're going to be wearing them like that. If I show you the faceplates now, the writing and the branding on them is upside down. And I don't really understand why. It just seems like an aesthetic goof, and I don't think it's supposed to be that way. Maybe they wanted these to look good sort of sitting on a desk or in an IEM stand, but I don't get it. Due to that sort of aesthetic goof, I'm going to be putting these in cool rather than sub-zero. They get downgraded because of that mistake. I think that's fair. you guys are probably tired of me saying stuff like this, but I kind of wish Moondrop made these in different colors to match different sort of styles of gaming setups. You know, the reds, the blues, all the sort of RGB stuff going on. Yeah, I just think it'd be cool to have these in different colors, but y'all are probably sick of me saying that every single IEM should come in different colorways, so I'm just going to leave it there. But as you know, my tastes are rather unconventional, so let's go ahead and see what the Council of Ladies has to say about the Moondrop Rays. Starting off with, are these pretty? We have a vote of 4-1 in favor, with the venerable lady number 4 being the only holdout here, thinking that these aren't pretty at all. As we move into the compliments, however, the vote swings into a 3-2 vote against the giving of compliments. So while the ladies like these, they wouldn't necessarily compliment you for wearing them out and about. Finally, let's go ahead and check in on their thoughts. We have generally positive vibes, I would say here. Aliens, blacklight posters, sort of jewel-like. I think it's interesting that they wouldn't give out compliments for these, since the comments overall look like they vibed fairly well with these. Even lady number 4 is saying mood ring, which I would interpret as a more positive sentiment. Overall, I would say not too bad, Moondrop. Well done. In terms of comfort, the additional 1/4 millimeter of nozzle girth didn't really bother me in my ears any. Like the May, I was able to wear these for 3 to 4 to 5 hour gaming, writing, working sessions, no problems, no issues, no real hotspots or any problems with the shape for me. As far as my wife goes, I had her test these alongside the May to see if that extra, 1/4 millimeter made any difference for her. And she ended up giving both of them a pass on the tiny ears test. She did prefer the fit on the May compared to the Rays, saying that the May were just a tad bit too big in terms of shell size to qualify for like a glove status, while the Rays here were a more sort of standard pass, with her saying that her ear tips were a bit more difficult to put on the Rays compared to the Mays. However, both were passes. She was able to form and maintain a seal even while laughing, talking, and eating with these. So Moondrop gets a pass for the Rays and a slightly stronger pass for the May. So before we jump into the audio evaluation, I wanted to take a good minute here and talk to you guys about the DSP presets on the Rays here and how many there are. Like the May, on the Moondrop Link app, you have access to 5 EQ presets for the Rays. You have FPS1, FPS2, Rhythm Game, AAA, and the default DSP. However, no matter what I tried, different versions of Android, different Android devices, the tablet as well, even the Chrome app that is running on a browser, I couldn't get any of those presets to activate. It just did not work. I'm going to go ahead and say that they're bugged for now, or they're just broken. I couldn't get them to work. However, in that Chrome app, the rest of the EQ presets are hiding. And those are 10 pro gaming EQ presets that Moondrop sort of collaborated with some pro gamers with, and you can load all of those onto the Ray. I'm going to go through them one by one and show you how they graph versus the standard DSP default signature from this cable. Getting started, we have Rainbow Six Siege, which looks like this. Then you have Game for Peace. And then you have 2 different presets for Battlefield. You have one for Battlefield 1. And then you have another for Battlefield 2. Then you have one for PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. You have one for Call of Duty Modern Warfare. One for Counter-Strike 2. One for Delta Force. One for Valorant. And finally, one for Apex Legends. A lot of different games here. I'm personally a little bit bummed there isn't a Microsoft Flight Simulator preset or a StarCraft EQ preset, but there's probably not a whole lot of demand for those. Should you want to forego the DSP cable, the analog tuning on the Rays is pretty awesome in that it's essentially the same analog tuning that's on the Moondrop May. I really like it. It's pretty awesome. I will say, if you were going to run the analog tuning on these 24/7, unless you really love these colors, I would save the $25 and just grab the May. It's the exact same sound. Speaking of the DSP cable here, there are reports of it having some USB noise with certain devices. Again, I tested on a bunch of different Android and Apple devices, and I did get some low-level hiss at sort of medium-high volumes with certain devices, but it went away as soon as music started playing, and I really didn't experience any massive drop in sound quality. Speaking of, I have seen reports of worse sound qualities with the Rays cable compared to the one on the May. I swapped cables between these two, did some A/B tests. I didn't hear a massive difference between the two. But, you know, I will say I've seen reports of noise and poor quality audio on virtually every DSP IEM, all the way from the Tangzu 1 and the Bunny, all the way up to things like the Kadenz and the USB C tips on some of the more expensive Dunu IEMs. So all I'm going to say is your experience might not be faultless like mine, so keep that in mind. As we move through the audio evaluation, I will be reviewing the default DSP tuning, because this IEM's price increase over the May is based on those game-centric DSP tunings, as well as the DSP Chrome app, which I think is the major selling point. Let me talk about it for a second here. It's a pretty decently featured little 7-band PEQ setup. I say decently featured because as of the writing of this video, you only have access to 7 bands, and you can only use peak filters. So there's no shelf filters or anything else, and you're limited to only 7 bands. It's a little disappointing compared to more standard free EQ software that you can use on PCs and Android devices. But let's go ahead and take a look a little deeper in the software. With the default DSP config loaded, you can see that the starting point for this tool is the analog tuning rather than the default DSP tuning. The app itself has 21 more built-in profiles, mostly designed to emulate Moondrop's other IEMs. So there's one for the Aria II, there's one for the Dusk, the Blessing 3, the LAN, the Psyche, the Meteor. I think it's pretty cool that these are just sort of sitting there in the app ready to go. And based on not my measurements or anyone else's measurements, but they're based on Moondrop's measurements. So should be pretty accurate in terms of the PEQ that they have loaded on there. It is pretty cool that you can also import EQ configurations that you've generated using Squiglink's Auto EQ or on other apps like the Peace EQ or Wavelet, and just throw them into Moondrop's Chrome app and it just picks up with no problems. I think it's a really nice way of just loading EQ onto the cable rather than having to input the configuration manually on the site or on the Moondrop Link app. I did a few. Here's some results. I tried a couple different tunings on here. The thing is, that Chrome app, as nice as it is and as, you know, sort of limited as it is, only works with the Rays as of the writing of this review. I tried every USB C enabled Moondrop IEM I own. I tried the Dusk, I tried the May, I tried the Chu 2 DSP, the Quarks, I tried the Kadenz with the Echo B adapter, I tried the free DSP cables. No dice. Nothing at all would connect with the Chrome app, just the Rays. And it says so right on the page. It says compatible items, Rays, and nothing else. Yeah, I guess that's the point of the Rays. The extra money over the May is access to that Chrome app, giving you the ability to bypass their, let's call it, not incredibly well realized mobile app. Lots of complaints about the Moondrop mobile app. Let's not talk about it right here. So yeah, it's a bummer that it only works with one IEM in their entire lineup, and it's a little bit of a bummer that they're also charging $25 more than the May for that functionality. It's a bit of a head scratcher in all honesty. But enough about the EQ and DSP profiles. All of my testing was done with the default DSP tuning, as it's the most standard option, and honestly, most of the gaming presets are a little wonky for music, if I'm honest. We'll go ahead and start things off with the bass. The Rays in this configuration are essentially what I would call a classic implementation of Moondrop's VSDF bass. That is to say, not bass light or shy, but they're not exactly bassy either. There's just barely enough punch and bounce to make it an exciting sound in bassier tracks, but not so much that you would consider things truly boosted in terms of bass. Mosca's Euphoria, for example, you get excellent bass texture and rumble on the low end, and good, decently punchy mids. It's not super dominant or overpowering. Most importantly, I don't feel like I'm really missing anything in the sound, and the track is still fun to listen to. Bass guitars and kick drums are also given enough energy to feel present without dominating over the rest of the instruments. The low piano notes and the bass line and drums in the Allman Brothers' Jessica gives the track good warmth and depth and good low-end presence without completely taking over the entire sound signature. The bass on the Rays here, as I said, present enough to make things seem fun and just warm enough, but not boosted to the point where I would call this a bassy set. I think it's very well balanced. The balanced bass leads into a clean but still present mid-range. The lower mids don't come across as lean or lacking to me in any way. They have just enough body to keep things sounding rich and engaging without being too, thin or causing any tonal aberration to the sound. Pink Floyd's Money has that awesome bass line offset with all the guitars, saxophones, synthesizers. There's no masking going on here. The cash register noises and all the instruments are very easily separable from each other. They don't cover each other up. There's no tonal affectation, as I mentioned. There's really no issues with the mid-range. It's just a very clean, groovy replay of this track. Female vocals, as you would expect from Moondrop's VSDF tuning, are forward, but honestly not as much as I've experienced on maybe some of the other Moondrop sets. Aki, Roboko-san, and Ayameru in Hololive's Suspect all sound really great on the Rays. Their vocal fundamentals are tonally unaffected by the bass or the upper mids and treble. Their notes are clear, and they sit sort of just above the instruments without completely taking over the replay or being put like on a spotlight or on a big pedestal, but still forward enough that it's a very enjoyable listen. Female vocal lovers, as I said, might miss the little bit of extra vocal shine that some other Moondrop sets tend to have, but I feel like the Rays still do a great job with not just female vocals, but the entire mid-range overall. Upper mids and treble are tuned to be nice and balanced, honestly, like the rest of the sound signature is. I already alluded to it, but the female vocal harmonics are just smooth and really well executed on this set without putting too much of a shine or sparkle on things. Blondie's Heart of Glass has the backing vocals and Debbie's voice sounding very natural. The decay on the harmonics I don't think is too quick or too slow. There isn't any sibilance or harsh sound, any of the sharper S sounds or T sounds, and the harmonics do their job of adding dimension and detail to the vocals. Treble is a sort of similar story. It's more subdued than I was expecting compared to something like the May. I feel less of the annular planar's presence on the Ray than I do on the Mays. Maybe Moondrop turned it down a little bit compared to the May, but in my experience, what it meant is that percussion was still crisp and sharp, but it didn't, cut through or blind you with the sparkle. I thought it was honestly pretty well done. I do miss a little bit of the airiness, but it's still, like I said, pretty good. The hi-hats and ride cymbals in Jamiroquai's Virtual Insanity felt energetic without being super overwhelming. The wash and sustain felt natural. There wasn't anything that I would say would keep treble-sensitive people away from this set. It's like the rest of the sound signature, very well balanced. Just missing a little bit of that airiness from the May, but some people will prefer that. In terms of technical performance, anything under 8 kilohertz is just pure single DD, since the annular planar is only active at 8 kilohertz and above. That doesn't mean it's bad, though. I think the DD here does a great job. The low-end details are very present and audible despite the more sort of subdued bass tuning. The big orchestral bass drum at the start of the droid invasion from the Phantom Menace is very easily audible, and you can pick up on the mallet texture that the performer is sort of putting into the strokes very easily on the Rays here. At the higher end of the scale, the Rays did decent on my Listen to the Glassware test on the Waltz for Debbie by Bill Evans Trio. It pulled through some of the more subtle moments that I tend to look for, and I was also able to make out a good bit of the conversation in the background as well. In terms of overall technical performance then, due to the tuning, I have this tied with the May if they're using the same tuning overall. Overall, I would put this roughly in line with the Simgot EW300 and below something like the Truthier Nova or the Simgot Supermix 4. Being a sort of gaming-focused IEM, I was expecting the Rays to do well in terms of stereo separation and imaging, and I wasn't disappointed. All of Friday Night in San Francisco sounded nice and wide with no constricted or closed-in feeling to the sound at all. Each guitarist had their space in each ear, and I didn't feel like the audience was encroaching on them, and everyone had their sort of own space. It was a nice wide sound. In terms of perceived 3D soundstage and imaging performance, Steely Dan's Aja sounded nice and wide. I could point out where each instrument was coming from. The sound field was very well filled in. It was nothing super crazy, but I would say compared to other $100 IEMs, the Rays here are a little bit above average when it comes to 3D soundstage, stereo separation, and overall imaging, which, I don't game professionally, but I think that that's a good showing for that sort of thing. So, the Rays stock DSP tuning is classic Moondrop VSDF. It's a mild V-shaped tuning characterized by clean bass, forward vocals, and treble that's sort of in a Goldilocks zone where it has enough detail and sparkle to sound clear and crisp, but not so much energy that ends up being shouty or fatiguing or piercing to anybody. It is very much the Moondrop house sound, and with very few exceptions, it's the tuning that most of Moondrop's IEMs tend to follow. Comparisons here are going to be interesting because as a DSP IEM, you can make this sound however you want. You can dial the bass up to Kingdom Come, you can put the treble in a hole if you're really super sensitive, you can do whatever you want. As you've been able to see this entire video, there's a good amount of Moondrop on the table. Maybe I should do a Moondrop buyer's guide. Let me know in the comments if you're interested in a Moondrop buyer's guide. But we'll go ahead and get started with the comparisons. So we'll start off with an IEM that I feel has flown under the radar pretty much its entire career, but even more so now that the price has jumped up to $46. It's the Moondrop LAN. And what will become a trend, the sound on these two is more similar than you would think. The thing that separates Moondrop's IEMs, I feel, are the drivers, the accessories. The tuning is more slight variations on the target, since they're all basically going for the Moondrop VSDF tuning. To my ears, the LAN are a little more vocal focused than the Rays. Vocals and their harmonics are a little bit more forward, the mids are a little bit cleaner, and that sort of contrast helps the vocals pop a little bit more. On the other hand, the Rays have the punchier, more impactful mid-bass presentation, warmer lower mids, and a more subdued treble. They just come across as more relaxing, more chilled out compared to the brighter sounding LAN. If you're looking for a great budget VSDF tuned IEM that doesn't have the same bass boost that the Chu 2 does, I think that the LAN is a fantastic choice. Similar overall accessories to the Chu 2, but just a great implementation of Moondrop's VSDF tuning. Rays, as I said, more relaxing, more chilled out, better for longer sessions, especially if you're a little bit treble sensitive in certain areas. But now we have the big one, what I think is the most interesting comparison on the docket, the set I've been talking about for a lot of this review because, I mean, it's the sister. It's the Moondrop May, currently priced at $75 US. These two are twins. Same drivers, similar cables, similar accessories, very similar overall build. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it too much. The Ray is essentially a recolored May. You get a $25 upcharge to use the Chrome web app, and that's basically it. The stock DSP tuning is different, but seeing as you could use the DSP to turn this into that or that into this, and the drivers are identical, this comparison is going to be more about the stock DSP tunings than anything else really. In their stock form, the Mays are basically a more V-shaped version of the Rays. You get more sub bass, more treble, that little extra airiness I was talking about earlier. If you prefer a cleaner, more neutral sound signature, you will probably prefer the stock tuning on the Rays. And if you want the more exciting, engaging, V-shaped sound, you'll probably prefer the May. That said, these are DSP IEMs, so the tuning on these can be whatever you want it to be. If the gaming EQs, the Green Goblin color scheme, and the easy-to-use Chrome web app are worth the extra $25 for you, then go for it. If not, the May is less of a good value at $75 compared to when it was $65, but I still think it's one of the better values in the sort of $50 to $100 price range, and it's still a great IEM in my opinion. And if you're not going to use the Chrome web app or the gaming EQs, this is 100% the better value here. Next up, we have an interloper into the Moondrop party. It is one of the more highly recommended IEMs in this price range. It is the Simgot EW300, priced between $65 and $80, depending on which model you're going for. Since I'm comparing it to DSP IEMs, I'm going to be talking about the $80 DSP version here. I compared the May and the EW300 pretty in-depth in my review of the EW300, and my conclusion was that they're both great IEMs with very similar technical performance, and they both offer sort of personalization to your sound, but in different ways. EW300 does it in analog form with its nozzles and the ability to swap the DSP cable for an analog cable, and the May does it with the DSP cable, and you only sort of get one extra tuning with the analog cable here. As you would expect from the May's twin, it's a very similar story here, only instead of the May being the more affordable option, 75 versus 80, the EW300 is now the more affordable option, since these are a good $20 less than the Rays. In terms of sound, I'm going to be talking about the silver nozzle tuning on the EW300 here. I think it matches the default DSP tuning on the Rays most closely. This will have more bass presence, more treble sparkle, and more of a vocal focus. It's just a more vocal forward V shape compared to the more neutral sound that comes on the Rays here. Simgot's the more fun choice, Rays the more chilled out, relaxed sound. You can get the more chilled out sound with the gold nozzles here on the EW300. I'll pull that up briefly. But it's still going to be bassier than the Rays. So if you want warm and relaxed, EW300. If you just want neutral and relaxed, Rays are still good. The EW300 are built a bit more solidly thanks to the all-metal construction, but the included case on the Simgot isn't as nice as the one that Moondrop puts here on the Rays. Again, you have to decide if you prefer the analog tuning options on the 300 or the DSP Chrome app on the Rays. $20, again, it's up to you to decide if it's worth the price difference here. Next up, at price parity with the Rays, we have the Moondrop Aria II, priced at $100 US. Now, I just got these in because, quite frankly, my wife and I saw the new red colorway, and we both saw the chance to finally pick up an Aria II. The accessories package on these two is near identical. Aria comes with a modular analog cable, which I like, and this comes with the DSP cable, and that's really the only difference here. In terms of sound, the Aria II comes across a little bit warmer and, again, more vocal forward compared to the default DSP setting on the Rays. You have a rumblier bass and more impactful sort of spotlight on female vocals on the Aria compared to the Rays. The Arias are also all metal versus the half resin on the Rays. I have been keeping an eye out for the infamous Aria paint chips that seem to be kind of common. I kind of hope that they work that kink out with this new red coating, so we'll see about that in the future. If, again, you want the versatility of the DSP app and you're a fan of purple and green, the Rays look like a good choice. If, however, you prefer red and you have a library loaded with J-pop, K-pop, and other female vocal sort of centric genres, the Aria might be a more stylish choice for you. Finally, we have the final installment in Moondrop's storied K-series, the replacement for my beloved Kato, the Kadenz, priced at $220 US. Listening to these two side by side, it's become extremely apparent that these follow the same VSDF tuning philosophy. The Rays essentially sound like a less vocal forward, less sparkly, slightly less resolving version of the Kadenz. You get less bass texture as well. I will have a review of the Kadenz coming very soon, but it's very clear to me that Moondrop put all their focus on the way the Kadenz handles female vocals, and it shows. There's just some extra magic going on here with female vocals that none of the other sets here really can emulate, even the Rays with their, sort of DSP form. Interestingly, the Kadenz also has a DSP capability. This comes with Moondrop's Echo B USB C Dongle DAC included in the box, and that's fully compatible with the Moondrop Link app, and you have all the PEQ functionality built in there. To be completely fair, these two are not playing on the same court. The Kadenz is twice the price of the Rays and then some, and it's definitely the more premium feeling of the two. Bigger box, better accessories, the whole 9 yards. But, the use of the DSP is going to be easier with the Chrome app on the Rays compared to the Moondrop Link app and the Kadenz here. I will say, if you want DSP as more of a sometimes solution rather than an always solution, the Kadenz having it as just a dongle is kind of nice. It can make a good setup if you kind of want to use the analog tuning most of the time and then want to switch to a DSP tuning sometimes. This, I think, is a good step up if you still want to retain some of the customizability of the Rays. But again, these are less than half the price. They don't really compete with each other. Just wanted to pull them in and mention the differences in sound. So let's wrap things up. LAN, Rays, Aria II, Kadenz, all essentially follow the Moondrop VSDF target curve. The Rays are the least vocal forward of the bunch and are also more relaxed in the upper treble and sub bass, so they'll be a little bit more neutral, a little bit better for people who might be treble sensitive. LAN, I still think are a good value, even though they, along with every other Moondrop IEM, has seen a price increase recently. Aria II is more of a traditional analog way of getting this tuning at this price, and it now comes in red. The Kadenz is the top of the non-special edition single DD Moondrop range, and it offers a part-time DSP solution with its Echo B dongle. Outside of Moondrop, the EW300 offers analog customizability through the use of tuning nozzles and swapping the DSP cable for a standard one. And while it isn't as versatile as the Rays, it's more solidly built, and Simgot's more V-shaped tonality can mean a more engaging listen if that's the sort of thing you're into. Finally, we come to the May, which I'm going to talk about as part of the conclusion. So hold on 1 second. All right, let's go ahead and pull up the Audio Amigo Arbitrary rating scale and see if we can find a good spot for the Moondrop Rays. The Rays are good looking, comfortable, have amazing versatility with the DSP cable, and sound great with both the default DSP tuning and the analog tuning if you just want to switch to a standard 3.5mm cable. The biggest problem with the Rays is that everything I just said applies to its twin sister, the May. And the May is $25 less. The Ray is, in all honesty, a little bit of a head scratcher for me. They're essentially asking you to pay $25 for a new color scheme and access to a web app and some tunings that they've designed with pro gamers. As a person who doesn't play competitive shooters, it's a bit of a hard sell. I really like the colors. The green and purple scheme I think is flat out amazing and they look great, but $25 is a good bit of money, especially these days. And while I'm sure some gamers will be willing to pay the upcharge over the May for the bespoke EQ tunings to get that competitive edge, I personally don't think the Rays are worth the extra cash over its twin sister, especially if someone online decides to take all those EQ tunings and just publish what they do so that you can replicate it here. I'm going to go ahead and put the Rays into but I like this, mostly because I genuinely like the colors, and the gaming market out there continues to surprise me with how big it is and how many people are willing to get that tiny little bit of extra edge in terms of sound. And I know there's a bunch of people who saw those gaming EQs and are like, oh yeah, I gotta try that out and see how much better I can be in that specific game. Personally, I think the May belongs in This Is Brilliant if I was going to put it on the list. Right there with the EW300, I think those two trade blows very well in terms of sort of value for money and versatility and technical performance under $100. Yeah, I think, Rays are good if you're a gamer, but for me though, it's going to be May. I guess I kind of spoiled my recommendation section. Oh well, let's go ahead and start by saying who shouldn't be buying the Rays. Most obviously, if you already have the May, there's no reason to be getting these unless you desperately have to have that color. Similarly, if you're looking to get the absolute best technical performance at $100, the Rays won't be it. Lastly, if you just hate messing with EQ, if it's a minefield to you and you're not planning on tweaking the sound of these at all, you're probably better off with something like the Aria, the LAN, or the May, just because you're basically paying for something that you're not going to be using. But if you're a competitive gamer and you mainline one of the games that I mentioned in the EQ list, and you want to see if that little bit of extra edge is going to help you get over that hill, the Rays with the extension cable I think can be a good option for you if you want to try that out. I think the Rays can also work for you if, as I said, you just really dig the purple and green color scheme and $25 to you personally isn't all that much money. I can see you picking these over the May just for the colors. As I said, they sound nearly identical. I respect the pursuit of style. I think that if you had the Hiby R4 and a purple and green cable and you just wanted a great sort of purple and green Ava look, yeah, go for it. Lastly, if you're in a small apartment or in a studio and your gaming setup is very small and minimalistic and you're very low on space, you maybe don't have the room for larger full-size headphones or a full-size, XLR microphone, I can see the case for these and their longer USB cable as sort of a one-and-done gaming headset solution. The mic quality is pretty decent and the sound is good, especially with the DSP tunings if you're playing the games they apply for. Overall, I wish Moondrop had priced these closer to the May. 75, 80 bucks, I think, would have been a much easier recommendation for me. And Moondrop, please, please, please consider giving the rest of your DSP IEMs access to that Chrome web app. It would just be really nice. Rays go on sale. I'd say keep an eye out for them. But yeah, that's going to be it for the Moondrop Ray review. I really dig the colors and the design. But with the May costing $25 less, I can't recommend this as strongly as I would like. Thank you so much to Apos for sending these out for review. I really appreciate it. Coming up next, we've got a Kiwi Ears double header. We've got the Septet followed by the Astral. So stay tuned for those if you're interested. As usual, I want to say thank you to all of you for watching and for all of your continued support. I hope you enjoyed the video. This has been Omar with Audio Amigo Reviews, and I will catch y'all next time.